The NFC playoffs are officially set, so in today's video, I want to give a preview as well as some predictions for the NFC side of the NFL playoffs. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. We are so close to 10,000 subscribers, just a few hundreds away, so make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. Let's hop into it. So the way this video is going to work is we're going to begin by just previewing every single game and then going into some predictions later in the game. We are going to begin with the 5 versus the 4, aka the Minnesota Vikings versus the LA Rams. Now, both these two teams are coming off a bye. Granted, the LA Rams were benching most of their starters, including, of course, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, but they still had a 5-point loss to the Seattle Seahawks, whereas the Minnesota Vikings came off a pretty disappointing loss versus the Detroit Lions. Now, in regards to the Minnesota Vikings versus the Detroit Lions game, I think that we all saw a couple flaws with the Minnesota Vikings, and they have a lot of question marks regarding the LA Rams right now. Yes, they are currently the winners of their division. They went 10-7. They had a really good end to the regular season, but I gotta be honest with you, I'm just not blown away with their resume. Because if you look at their schedule, if you just kind of look at the past few weeks, they had a 4-point victory over the Arizona Cardinals, a good team, but still a game where they only scored 13 points. Then they had a 19-9 victory over the New York Jets, which not very impressive with that victory either. A 12-6 victory versus the San Francisco 49ers, and then obviously you had the good Buffalo Bills game. Then you had a 7-point win versus the Saints. You lost by 17 to the Eagles. You barely beat New England Patriots. You lost to the Dolphins, and I will say, they do have a win over the Minnesota Vikings. They do have a win over the Buffalo Bills. So you do obviously have to give them their flowers. But a lot of their victories are against not so good to just average teams. And they're not blowing teams out, or they're not really dominating games. They're just kind of happen to win them, which obviously give them credit. They made the plays to win the game. But when you are a 10-win team, I kind of want to see be a bit more dominant, especially as we get towards obviously the playoffs. Now, in regards to that victory that I was talking about versus the Minnesota Vikings, there are some things that we can take away from that game that will potentially translate over into this playoff game. Obviously, this was a game played all the way back in October. It is currently January, so there's only so much you can take from it. But Matthew Stafford was playing, Kyren Williams was playing, Puka Nacua had a really good game in that one, so did Justin Jefferson. So a lot of the guys that did play in that game will obviously be playing in this playoff game. So I think that game is a good sort of gateway to understand how this game might get played. I do think Minnesota should have the upper hand in this one. I potentially believe that they have, in my opinion, the better personnel. However, the LA Rams obviously have more experience, whereas obviously Minnesota has not as much experience. So that game's going to be interesting, but let's go ahead and move on to the 6 versus the 3, aka the Buccaneers versus the Washington Commanders. For Washington, obviously, this is a team that was literally kind of just put together in one offseason. They have so many new pieces and additions from this past offseason and, of course, the draft that has made up who this Washington Commanders team has turned into this year. It's been an incredible ride for the Washington Commanders, and of course, the person that has been leading the pack has been Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels has been, in my opinion, the best rookie of this rookie class. He has just simply put been fantastic all year long. Doesn't make many mistakes, and when he does make mistakes, he does bounce back from them really quickly. Obviously, these two teams have played each other, but it was all the way back in week 1, so not a whole lot that we can really take from that game because Washington was just trying to figure things out. They had a young rookie quarterback, whereas the Buccaneers are essentially a very similar team to who they were last year, so it wasn't like we can take much from that week 1 performance. The thing that intrigues me the most about this game is just the fact that Tampa Bay, when they are clicked on and they're turning points and they're playing at a high level, they are truly one of the best teams in the NFL. They have a quarterback who, in my opinion, is playing his best ball of his career. And if this team can find ways to run the football with Bucky Irving, get the ball out to Mike Evans, and if the offensive line is playing at a high level, that Buccaneers team will put up numbers. It's just going to be a matter of, can that Commanders defense create some turnovers, get some stops, and I think that they probably could do so. I truly do believe that this game could go either way because both these offenses have been somewhat hot and cold these past couple weeks, especially Tampa Bay, where they could look absolutely dominant for one half and then have just a terrible second half or just have a really bad quarter. This is a Buccaneers team that it's been a weird team all year long, but when they are playing at a high level, they truly are a really good team and a really fun team to watch. For Washington, it's going to be very important to obviously run the football effectively. Yes, you're going up against Vita Vea and that Buccaneers defensive line, which, has some really good pieces and, of course, some really good linebackers that are known to sniff out the run quite well. But if Washington can run the ball effectively and create chunk plays with Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz and maybe Austin Eckler as well, I think Washington could win this game, but it's a 50-50 shot, that's for sure. And then the last game we'll talk about in this video is the Green Bay Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles, the 2 seed versus the 7 seed. However, I kind of think that this is maybe the most intriguing game out of these 3 games. Obviously, these 2 teams did meet up in week 1. I believe that game was in Brazil. However, Jordan Love was injured in that game, so how much can we really take away from that game? Don't think we can take too much. Philadelphia has really found themselves these past couple weeks. Even though Jalen Hurts did have an injury, prior to his injury, they were playing, in my opinion, their best football of the season. I think a big question for this game is going to be, can Jalen Hurts bounce back from potential rust for not playing within the past, 2.5, 3 weeks at this point? If Jalen Hurts does come back and play at a high level, I think Philadelphia has a really good shot to win this game. However, if there is some early rust in the game, maybe some turnovers, maybe just a couple bad misses here and there, Green Bay can find a way to stay in this game and make this one interesting. Now, speaking of injuries, we obviously have to talk about Jordan Love, who suffered some sort of weird injury in the Chicago game. Granted, it looked like he was available to come back. He had his helmet on, he was throwing the football, so take that as you will. However, it's pretty clear and obvious that Jordan Love is not 100%. So you got 2 quarterbacks in this game that more than likely won't be their 100% normal self. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see which one is more impactful on their team, both in a positive and in a negative way. These 2 teams both know how to run the football. Josh Jacobs has had a really awesome season, but it really does not compare to Saquon Barkley, who's having an all-time like season. And defensively wise, the Packers have been playing some good defense this year, but the Eagles defense is maybe the best defense in the entire NFL. So because that, I do think a lot of people are going to have Philadelphia winning this game, and I think rightfully so. Philadelphia has been, in my opinion, one of the hottest teams in the NFL prior to the Jalen Hurts injury, and I think if Jalen Hurts comes out there and plays well, I think they have a really good shot of winning this game. Another kind of key thing to think about with this matchup is going to be the coaching in this one. I personally am not a massive fan of Philadelphia's coaching staff. I think they know how to win games, and I think they know their formula, but I've always been skeptical about them when it comes down to playoff time. Not necessarily Nick Sirianni because he isn't running the offense, but guys like Kellen Moore, who has kind of been notorious for not really putting together great playoff game plans, especially when he was at Dallas. So again, I mean, his game plan, his schematics, everything has been changed from his time with Dallas to now with Philadelphia, but I am just still a little bit skeptical about that, whereas we know that Green Bay has a head coach who knows how to win in the playoffs, even though he's had his fair share of ups and downs. However, he obviously does have the experience. These are 2 teams that both have experience. Obviously, Philadelphia made it to a Super Bowl. Granted, a lot of new guys are now on the team, but still, a lot of guys were on that Super Bowl run. Same thing with Green Bay. Last year, they had a deep playoff run, so these are not 2 inexperienced teams. I don't expect the moment to be too big for either one of them. Now it's time for some predictions. We're going to begin in the same order that we did in this video, beginning with the Minnesota Vikings versus the LA Rams. This matchup is really interesting because if you look back at the past, obviously the LA Rams beat the Minnesota Vikings. So you would personally believe that I would personally go with the LA Rams to match them again. However, beating a team twice is really difficult. And Minnesota, they kind of got, I don't want to say exposed, but some of their flaws were shown off first the Detroit Lions. Now they kind of maybe know their flaws a bit more. They can game plan around it. That Detroit Lions game, they had plenty of opportunities. They just didn't execute in the red zone. And if they executed in the red zone, they could have easily scored 28 plus points, but they didn't do so. That LA Rams defensive line does scare me because I do believe they will be able to get a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold, especially because the Vikings like to throw the ball deep down the field. But I don't really think that the Rams have the secondary to match up with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and so on and so forth. Now, on the flip side, I do think Minnesota's defense will give a good challenge for the LA Rams offense. Obviously, the LA Rams offense has a veteran guy in Matthew Stafford who the moment's never too big. There's certain things that he's seen that nobody else has seen. So even if there are some crazy formations, some crazy things being shown on the defensive side of the field, I think Matthew Stafford will do a fine job of dissecting both the secondary, the defensive line, and the linebackers. So this game is truly interesting. I don't want to say it's a 50-50 game because I don't think it is, but I am going to favor the Minnesota Vikings in this matchup. You don't win 14 games for no reason. Yes, there have been some highs and some lows and some really questionable wins out there, but I think that Minnesota Vikings team is just a really awesome team that has a great defense and has an offense that is extremely potent. If Minnesota just shows up, plays their brand of football, and gets a couple deep shots to go their way, I do think Minnesota is going to win the game. So because that, I am going to predict the Minnesota Vikings to defeat the LA Rams with a final score 31-27. Next, the Washington Commanders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This one to me is, I don't want to say a coin toss, but it's really difficult to predict this one just because we don't really have a just disappointing turnover-filled quarter of the game. I expect them to play at a high level throughout this one, so I think Tampa Bay is definitely going to have a shot in this one, but Jaden Daniels, his rushing ability, his clutch factor, Terry McLaurin has been incredible this year. We'll say this game is going to be played in Tampa Bay, which does, of course, favor the Buccaneers quite heavily. But I have a feeling that Jaden Daniels is going to show up big time. He's one of those quarterbacks that the moment never seems too bright for him, even though he's incredibly young. He's been in many big moments throughout his college career, and I don't think the playoffs are going to be too big for him. I kind of think Washington's going to win this one. Maybe this is a bit more of a gut feeling, but Tampa Bay has been prone to some turnovers. They also don't have the greatest defense. Obviously, you can't take much on that week 1 victory because that was Jaden Daniels' first game in the NFL, so I don't take hardly anything from that. And even in that game, I thought there were some great flashes from Jaden Daniels. Commanders defense has some guys defensively with Marshawn Lattimore, Dante Fowler, so on and so forth. So I'm going to predict the Washington Commanders to win a surprisingly, maybe not incredibly high scoring game. I have the final score 24-22. And then lastly, we have the Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. As I mentioned, this game is truly a very fun and interesting game to talk about because we don't really know what version of these quarterbacks we're really going to get. If we get the version of Jalen Hurts prior to the injury where he was throwing the ball incredibly well to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, as well as running the football effectively, then I think that it's going to be potentially a bit of a runaway victory for the Philadelphia Eagles. However, I'm going to assume that there is a little bit of rust in this game. Saquon Barkley might have to carry them early in the game, and against that Green Bay Packers defense, I do think that he will find a good amount of success rushing the football. So for Green Bay, it's going to be very important to, number one, stuff the run, force Jalen Hurts to defeat them with his hand, and if he does so, then I just hope that you can create some turnovers, and I also do think that is very important for this Packers defense. Create some turnovers, give your offense some good opportunities to add some points and potentially build a lead, and I think Green Bay could win the game. However, as long as Philadelphia does not turn the ball over, and I think Jordan Love will struggle from here to there versus that great Philadelphia defense, I do think Philadelphia will win this game. As long as they don't turn the ball over, if they can run the ball somewhat effectively, and as long as Jalen Hurts at some point in this game plays like his usual self, I do think Philadelphia will win this game. I'm going to predict Philadelphia to win 30-20. However, you guys let me know in the comment section below your playoff predictions for the NFC side of things. Tomorrow we will be talking about the AFC, so if you're interested in that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.